Welcome back to L2Games, and welcome to episode 8 of the L2Games Podcast. To be honest, I thought we had done more of these up till now, but apparently not. As usual, I'm your host, Nick, and today I am joined by a new guest to the L2Games Podcast, my good friend Adam. Adam, how are you doing today?
Hey, good to be here, Nick. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. So, the way I've been starting these with other guests is just let them know, who you are, like what kind of games you play, your history with gaming, that sort of thing. Just whatever comes to mind.
Oh, sure, right. So as a quick overview, certainly the narrative action-adventure games are of interest to me. Favorites, Horizon Zero Dawn, games like Sekiro, able to do a charmless run and work my way up to that as well. And then just some, light platform as well. Celeste finished very well as part of that too, right, and some other types of platformers. So wide variety, mostly stuck on PlayStation myself throughout the years, right. But yeah.
Yeah, and I know you spent a big chunk of this year platinuming Rayman Legends.
Yeah, that was a good almost decade in the making, it seems, right? Just from the online trophy that required. So yeah, no, I got back into that, just trying to round out some of my other platformers here to get that up to snuff. But yeah. All
right. Well, before we get too far into what we're going into here, I just want to give a big thank you to all of the subscribers on our YouTube channel this past year. It's seen huge growth, a ton more than I ever expected. And in particular, I want to give two very special shout-outs to, I hope I'm saying your names right, Animitra10 and Starkiller1677. You guys have been awesome to have on the channel, and I appreciate the support. As for everyone else, I appreciate you guys too. Thank you so much for subscribing, and hopefully we can bring you some more content like this in the new year. Speaking of New Year's, I think it's a time of reflection, it's a time to set goals for the future, and a time to look back on what happened in the past year and what was great about it, what wasn't so great. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about 2021 in gaming. And Adam, I wanted to have you on here today because I know you had a chance to play some of the bigger games that came out in 2021. And of course, I'm sitting over here with my limited budget thinking, well, I missed out on a few things. It was kind of a weird year in gaming. On the one hand, there were a few hits that came out. On the other, though, it also kind of feels like there wasn't that much that actually did release. And maybe that's because of the number of games that got delayed throughout the year, or maybe it's just that a lot of what did release wasn't really my cup of tea. But I wanted to get just your quick general thoughts on 2021 in gaming.
Yeah, happy to. That's certainly a broad topic. I'll say my probably biggest achievement is actually securing a PS5 in and of itself, right? That's probably the hardest part to this, especially as we continue with the, the chip shortage that has limited just the supply. That has certainly just been drastically under what the demand has been, right? So certainly quite privileged to have been able to secure a device as well as several of the games itself, as you allude to there. Right? Any particular category of game that you're interested in here, Nick, that you wanted to lead us off here?
Well, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, how it felt compared to other years in gaming. I've talked to a lot of people who have said that they feel like just nothing happened in gaming this year.
That's an interesting impression. I perhaps have a different one, right? And again, privileged just to have the PS5 itself. I've found like a fair amount of games took a good advantage, especially with the adaptive triggers and the other different features, right? With this year in gaming too. So Returnal comes to mind, a game I can't sing enough praises about, right? And a game I typically actually wouldn't have been interested in. This kind of roguelike, procedurally generated third-person action shooter from excellent developer Housemarque Games had done Resogun and other related games in the past. Very excellent particle effects that they've done, but managed to achieve something quite unique. I had felt, right, just in terms of a nice narrative-driven challenge, which was fairly difficult at times, but never unforgiving, right, and always a process of kind of learning throughout the process. Of course, your progress resets, except for some key items that you get after kind of each depth through, which kind of hammers home that roguelike sense. But really made excellent use in terms of I'm forgetting the actual term in terms of the special abilities that you use that required kind of differential levels of pressure on the adaptive triggers and whatnot. But a game that excellent, right? Limited in terms of at start from the lack of it seems save feature, right? That you could actually discontinue and disconnect the game and then go on to do other things. You actually need to they had recommended just putting the system itself into like a save. What is that mode, Nick? That I'm forgetting the name of it off the top of my head here. Rest mode. Thank you, rest mode. off the bat here, which is really just not a viable solution, especially for, and I feel for the folks who had families, right, or other folks on the system, or just had other things they wanted to do on the PS5. So that certainly limited, I think, some accessibility off the bat, and I know that's since been corrected, right, in the past couple months as well. So certainly one of the highlights that came from me, like anything that you've heard in terms of Returnal, Nick, in terms of other folks that you've talked to.
I mean, I've seen generally positive reviews about it, but again, the lack of a save feature when it launched was one of the things that kept me away from it. I think for me, overall throughout the year, though, one of the things that contributed to it feeling like almost non-existent in terms of gaming was, aside from not picking up games like Returnal because of that lack of features, was also that I think 2021 was the first year where we really saw the effects of the pandemic hit the gaming industry. Last year, a bunch of games that were still on track to release did release because they were near the end of their development cycles before the pandemic actually got into full swing. This year, you had games that were in the middle of their development cycle that got hit hard and totally disrupted, and so we've seen a ton of delays. And just looking at the list here, we saw Hogwarts Legacy delayed from 2021 to 2022, Lord of the Rings Gollum, the next-gen versions of Cyberpunk 2077, Prince of Persia Sands of Time Remake, Gotham Knights, Gran Turismo 7, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, God of War Ragnarok. So there have been a ton of games that have been delayed. Oh, and also Grand Theft Auto 5 Next-Gen Edition, which you still haven't played.
No, I still have not. Yeah, don't worry. When it comes out on the PS6, I'm sure I'll be able to get around to it at that time. So, but no, that's an excellent point. And many, as you say, many have been disrupted, and so perhaps felt a bit of a lighter year just in terms of expectations, and that being different because of, understandably, just in all sectors of society, really, right? Most especially health, but including gaming too.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it's hit the entertainment industry as a whole really hard. We've seen plenty of movie delays as well. So one of the big things that did happen this year, though, is we saw a lot of remakes and remasters. So I want to talk about a few of those quickly. Sure. I'm curious, have you played the most recent Pokemon game, Sword and Shield?
No, I actually haven't had. I was just talking with a friend the other day. Really, it was Gen 1 and Gen 3 for me of like Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Sapphire back in the day. But I've really actually been disconnected from Pokemon since then. So I'm, as you can imagine, quite out of date in terms of where we're at now.
Okay, because those were my favorites too, Gen 1 and Gen 3. But I found that the most recent Pokemon games, Sword and Shield, were just not up to par. They felt very paternalistic in terms of how they treated the player, because throughout all of Pokemon's history, you're always playing as this young kid who goes off on a big adventure with all of their Pokemon companions, and it never matters that you're playing as a child because they've got these Pokemon with them, and they've got this special bond with them, and so, even as a 10-year-old kid, you can do anything the grown-ups can do. But Sword and Shield make this point of reminding you constantly, you're just a kid, stay out of the adult business. And so that really rubbed me the wrong way. So one of the remakes that came out this year was Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which I felt was... A lot of people criticized it on the basis of sticking maybe a little too closely to Pokemon Pearl and Diamond, but I felt like it was a good return to form for them.
Mm-hmm. So if I understand that correctly, was it just that it felt too paternalistic in terms of some of the mechanics?
Not in terms of the mechanics, just in terms of the storytelling.
I see. Okay.
Mechanically, it was largely the same. They did introduce in Sword and Shield this big open field area where you could find Pokemon roaming around. There was a lot less environmental puzzle solving as well. It just felt like it walked you through the game a little too much.
Okay,
That's the big issue.
No, thanks for that clarification again. Certainly it's my ignorance of not knowing kind of those pieces too, but that's interesting in terms of the storytelling being a little bit more kind of, it seems hand-holdy, right, as part of some elements of that in comparison to what's happened in the past, but yeah.
The next big remaster we got was Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and I absolutely love this. Have you played Mass Effect before? I think I remember you saying you played a bit of one of them.
So surprisingly not, right? It seems a game in series right up my alley, and it's on my ever-growing list and backlog of games that I, have for me, right? Which includes still The Last of Us 2, which I have not yet gotten to, as well as Uncharted 4, right? So some very, very high, high up AAA titles that I still haven't played. But yeah, no, it's I like the world, and concept in terms of the, of course the narrative stories that matter, right? In terms of different characters and side missions of companions that then influence outcomes later on. So that's a key feature that I quite like. But yeah, I know you've played them quite extensively, Nick. Actually, multiple times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've played through them at least 4 times through the whole trilogy. Probably more than that, but it was absolutely one of the things I'd really been hoping for, was that we would get a remaster of the original Mass Effect trilogy for modern consoles. Mainly because I was left with a really sour taste in my mouth after Mass Effect Andromeda, but we won't talk about that because it doesn't exist anymore in my mind. It's not there. It's not part of Mass Effect. It can go away.
I've heard a vague sentiment of that in my musings on the internet and whatnot, but yeah. Well, hopefully the remasters refresh the palate when it comes to that then.
Okay, so next on my list is Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy Definitive Edition, which launched to plenty of controversy because it was launched in a state where it seemed like it was not performing anywhere near the level it should have. There were constant frame drops, games crashing, audio bugs. But there was this one really funny bug I remember seeing where if you swerved a car back and forth really quickly, it would make your car actually grow in width until it took up multiple lanes.
Oh, well, sometimes the bugs like that actually add to the game, honestly, in terms of the enjoyment factor I found. Well, obviously there's that balance in terms of what point is just impairing in terms of its function, but,
Yeah, that's one thing.
Clips. Yeah.
That's one thing I kind of wish they hadn't patched. And then the last big remaster for me was Alan Wake Remastered. Alan Wake is one of my favorite games of all time, and I was so looking forward to a remaster of this. It's such an underrated and underplayed game. I really wish people would play it, and we finally got, after 11 years after the release of the original, we got the announcement that a sequel is coming in 2023. I am so looking forward to that. So happy.
I know you're quite into that, the horror genre overall, right? And especially Alan Wake 2, right? And so, what draws you from that series, do you think?
Really, it's the narrative. When I first played the game, I was an aspiring young writer, and so I really connected with this story of a protagonist who himself is this best-selling author who's dealing with writer's block as well as struggling through the complexities of his marriage and struggling with alcoholism, short temper. And then, of course, everything hits the fan when he goes on vacation, and all of a sudden, a horror story that he doesn't remember writing comes to life, and so he's thrown into the absolute worst-case scenario for him. And so I really connected with it.
It seems to resonate with you in terms of even elements of that hero's journey, like that archetypal kind of progression too. So, well, certainly I've always felt avoided the horror genre myself in terms of not tolerating the jump scares as much as others. But hey, if it's for you, that's great.
Okay, so with that out of the way, I want to get into the big games of 2021 and talk a bit about those, because there were actually quite a few, despite the fact that it kind of feels like it was a relatively light year, at least from my perspective, in terms of big AAA releases. Early on in the year, we had games like Hitman 3, Outriders, but the first big one that comes to my mind is Deathloop. I know you played Deathloop, you got the Platinum Trophy in that, as did I, and what really drew me to playing Deathloop wasn't really any of the promotional material, any of the gameplay I had seen. Looking at it, I wasn't really that interested. But then I started to notice that media outlets were giving it crazy high review scores. Both IGN and GameSpot gave it a 10 out of 10. Mm-hmm. So I decided to go and pick it up. But I want to get your thoughts on Deathloop.
Yeah, and so I had, like yourself, also noted those positive reviews and those outstanding reviews, actually. But also, I had seen some of the promotional material and found kind of that certainly, more like retro artistic style and this kind of dynamic of these rival assassins actually quite striking for me. And there's this talking about, honestly, this puzzle action adventure piece of really piecing together a single solution to this kind of multiple different biomes and different targets within those biomes that change depending on your actions in previous. And so those pieces were quite appealing to me. But yeah, no, I know you had certainly many thoughts after platinum the trophy in terms of if it lived up to the expectations or not.
Yep, and the answer to that is a big fat no. I felt that Deathloop was incredibly overrated. I can't stress enough how overrated I thought it was. I love the retrofuturism aesthetic to it. I thought that was really well done. It was a great design choice. But as far as gameplay goes, a lot of it is a very big illusion once you start peeling back the layers. The general structure of this whole time looping roguelike, once you break it down to what it actually is, the illusion disappears and you realize what it really is a series of 14 different levels, of which you can only pick one out of a set of 4 at a time to play, and you're just trying to figure out what the proper order to play these levels is. And so when I really got down to that and realized that's what it was, the illusion just fell apart for me, and I thought, well, I've seen time loops done in games before, and I've seen it done much better, and I saw it done 21 years ago in 2000 on the Nintendo 64 with The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. That one stands out to me because it's my favorite game of all time, and seeing, that they had the capacity back then to have a full day-night cycle and a time loop where you have to keep cycling through over and over again in order to finish everything in the game, it felt that much more involved to me, that much more immersive as far as the idea of a time loop in a game compared to Deathloop. So that part really fell apart for me for Deathloop. The other big problem I had was the gameplay overall. It's a competent first-person shooter, but I wouldn't say it does much more than that. It felt a lot like a BioShock clone, at least in terms of the abilities on one hand and your weapon on the other. But I'm someone who likes to play any PvE game with aim assists turned off. And so when you turn off the aim snapping in Deathloop, the combat really starts to feel bland. For some reason, just not snapping to enemies, the satisfaction of shooting someone goes away in that game, and so I felt like it just didn't live up to the standards of other first-person shooters.
And that's fair, right? I had a different sense to that as well. Is that I'm someone who's as not as proficient as a first-person shooter as yourself, right? I know Apex Legends is a series of yours that you quite enjoy, right, and are skilled at. But for me, it was actually the investigative work that kind of drew and it remains to this day one of the main points. And I agree, while there is this main plotline and solution that is rewarding in and of itself, I had found to investigate, right, there's actually quite a lot of side content that begins to be pieced together. There's minor spoilers for some of the stuff as well, but you eventually learn in terms of one of the biomes at night, right, of this actually NPC character who, like yourself, retains memories of what happens in previous loops, right, and actually exploring how they come to that and process that and deal with that. And that's something that I actually quite enjoy, right, and especially I know some of the critiques for some folks is just the amount of actual text reading in the game. I don't mind that, right, and take my time actually enjoying the lore a little bit with that, and found that overall, even setting back up in terms of looking at which biome to go in, right, or essentially which of the 4 that you go in for a specific time, influencing the loadouts that you do based on the objectives, right, and you load out slowly improving based on what you've done in previous loops, to be quite fulfilling of itself. I will separate kind of the main gameplay from the actual kind of platinum grind too, which some of those trophies just became a bit repetitive to go through. Ghost at the Party especially, I don't know if you remember that one, Nick, yeah. Right, it's the one up damn evening, you have to go in and kill all 3 of the targets, right, without getting noticed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it was, I had played post-update, or post-most recent update, I forget forget which one we're now on at this particular stage. But the AI is slightly tuned to be a bit more sensitive, right? So it was perhaps a little bit more of a grind than was enjoyable there.
Yeah. Yeah, that one was a tough one to get. But just to loop back to your comments about the text reading, I think that's one of the issues I had with the game overall is as a largely single-player game, I like a single-player game to have a strong narrative, and because so much of that narrative comes in the form of these text documents, you miss out on a lot of it if you don't have the patience to sit there and read. And I didn't have a lot of time on my hands to go and read through all of that, so I did rush through it a bit. So I just wish there had been a little more personality infused to the game by spoon-feeding me that narrative. As much as I don't like using that term, I really would like the narrative to be presented to me instead of having to go and seek it out. The other big issue I had was the multiplayer. Because when the game first came out, the multiplayer was completely broken. I loved this concept of invading someone else's game and just completely messing with them. I remember the first time I tried it, one of my friends was on his PlayStation, and just completely unsuspecting, unaware, I just went into his game, walked up behind him, and started shooting him. Of course, with the huge advantage Colt gets over invading Juliana's, he swiftly kicked my rear end, and that ended really quickly. But it was a fun concept. It reminded me a lot of the first Watch Dogs game, where you could have random players invade your game and start hacking you. So it was a cool concept. It was poorly executed. The matchmaking took forever. It was really imbalanced. And so that really took away from that for me.
Yeah, no, and I would echo that actually in terms of the multiplayer concerns overall, right? And I played recently in terms of the multiplayer, and well, Hunter rank 30, so nowhere near the top, in terms of where folks are at that, right? But some improvements that I acknowledge have been made in terms of at least for folks who are camping out in the tunnels, right? The tunnels open after a set amount of time now, right? Which is an improvement, but certainly the advantage is strongly towards Cult with a 3-to-1 life advantage. The Cult players essentially having their prepped and preferred total kit in terms of what slabs they're equipping as well as weapons, and you're essentially kind of given this RNG based progressive system as Juliana, right? And that and so those pieces, and certainly there continues to be kind of problems with connectivity as well as matchmaking as well that I acknowledge too, right? It is quite thrilling when you are every victory with Juliana feels earned, certainly as part of that, if you are kind of having multiple cycles in which you are essentially trumping Colt, right? So but I think that certainly is a fair critique with where things are at right now for the multiplayer, and it's something I would also echo.
All right, so with that out of the way, the next game I had on my list to talk about was Returnal, but we've already sort of covered that. Of course, I haven't had the chance to play it yet, and you were, of course, singing its praises, and so definitely something I'm looking forward to checking out. But next thing I want to cover is Guardians of the Galaxy, because it had one of the best stories in recent memory as far as video games go.
And I would agree with that, and I am very appreciative that it won the Game of the Year awards in terms of the actual narrative component of the story, and actually would agree with that particular decision there. Right? Really quite enjoyed the storyline to it. Right? Other elements, were average, I would say, just in terms of gameplay as well as, like functional, but average when it came to, gameplay and, some very, very minor kind of platforming, puzzle-based stuff that they also integrated there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it was a narrative that really stuck out. It was a very emotional story, especially with the focus largely being on Star-Lord and his journey through losing his mother to having to come together with this team, losing a lover, discovering that he may or may not be a father. So all of that created a very, very emotional story that I felt worked really well with the team dynamic of the Guardians. Where the game fell apart for me was in terms of combat mostly, because there was just something that was not quite satisfying enough about the shooting mechanics. Enemies were far too bullet spongy for my liking, and I get from a gameplay perspective that was largely to encourage people to make sure they were using all the Guardians' abilities. Obviously, the game is called Guardians of the Galaxy, not Star-Lord and his amazing friends. So they want you to use every ability at your disposal. I just felt like maybe it could have been done a little better in a way that made combat feel more impactful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just want to quickly return to the narrative component and that the emotional related phone as well. And I think one of the components in reflection that really helped fuel this for each of the characters is that whole context of the promise of, promising something that was lost to folks, and the result, in the power essentially that the Magus had been able to essentially gain through the universal truths of truth, right? And so you really got to dive deep into each, of the characters, of the Guardians in terms of what the promise actually meant to them, and going forward in terms of Drax's vision more in depth as part of that, in terms of losing his wife as well as his child, right, to Thanos, right, and so that just impacted the power of understanding from Rocket's perspective as well, the trauma that he had endured in terms of the experimentation resulting in his fear of water, right, because of the test tube based nature, right, in terms of Half-World, right, and so I agree, it really came together quite well, and you really got the sense of this ragtag team that really was on the outs, was having a lot of difficulties and challenges staying together, right, at one point literally Groot and as well as Rocket walking out to folks really uniting, together and being like, this is how we land, this is us, right? I think Gamora notes straight to when you're crash landing on one of the later planets. Yes, right, in the game. But sorry, after the quick segue there, but I just wanted to cap off just a conversation.
Oh no, that of course, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because one of the things I was just thinking is, I felt like Drax had the strongest arc among all of the characters other than Star-Lord, but looking back at it now, everyone had a really strong arc of the main Guardians, and, well, I mean, aside from Groot, sort of, because there's only so much you can do with the line, I am Groot, but um, overall, it was really well done in terms of balancing the stories of each of these characters.
Mm-hmm. Like at some point in those stories were fleshed out just by the Guardians collectibles that you could get with that too, right? And I did Platinum Guardians of the Galaxy as well, but unfortunately, it's limited in this respect, is that the narrative is gated behind finding some of these collectibles, and that even trying to access them through chapter select actually then doesn't result in the game integrating that in the collectibles that you have accrued in terms of the actual save game, right? So that's just unfortunate. Essentially, relegating you to a new game plus file, right? If you wanted to go back through and actually collect all of that stuff, right? And I think you only needed, what is it, like, so all of them for one Guardian, as well as at least half of them overall, I believe, for the trophies, if that's correct, eh, Nick?
Yeah. Also, you have to go back and do a new game plus if you decided to be an idiot and blow all your units on nowhere instead of paying your Nova Corps fine.
Oh, is that you? No way. What did you spend on the claw machine and the the lottery tickets, or what did you get there?
Might have. Well, I bought the collectible for Gamora, and then I did the claw machine, and then there was the shell game with that big eyeball-looking alien.
Oh, don't tell me you went for the shell game, man.
Okay, I played it once, and the first time you play it, you win, and I was like, okay, well, maybe it isn't rigged. And so I played it a second time, and I was like, okay, well, there goes all the money. Whoops.
They got you. They got you, right? I'm glad you're able to experience this in-game and not in real world, at least for your first encounter with one of those, is the ball underneath one of these cups? It's just a type game, but yeah.
Yeah, no, they got me.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't have gotten the trophy for that, which is unfortunate, because you then need to wait in terms of, at least I think it's like chapter 9 or 10, I can't remember quite off the top of my head here.
Right, yeah, it's fairly late in the game. Because I thought maybe I should hold on to the money, and I was like, what are the odds that's actually going to be something I need to do later in this game?
Did you also buy the whatever device that you could buy to disable the Nova Lock, or supposedly disable the Nova Lock that was on your ship?
No, I didn't do that.
Nice. Okay. Because I don't know if that was actually a scam or not, right? Like, it read as a scam to me. Like, didn't get it. Not sure, right? I'm sure folks who online will be able to weigh in more on that. But.
So, keeping on the sci-fi theme, the next big game I want to talk about is one of my favorites this year, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Your thoughts?
Oh yes. Oh well, this is a for day one buy for me, as you know, right? And as someone who really enjoyed the Ratchet and Clank, right, in terms of some of the remastered stuff, Crack in Time still stands out as one of the best games that I remember. There's a lot of nostalgia, of course, infused with this, but of my adolescenthood, certainly playing that, right? But you know what? And I thought it was. quite an earnest showing, right, from, Insomniac Games, who, like, are just quite skilled at making Ratchet and Clank games, honestly, at this stage, right? I like the inclusion in terms of, especially Rivet and going through kind of her journey in the Resistance and what that looked like. I thought the story itself could have been, a little bit more than superficial in some moments, right? Certainly I think that it could have been a little bit deeper in some of that, right? But the gameplay was phenomenal. I really liked the addition of the dash, right? Really liked, and I had played on whatever the highest difficulty setting was on that, right? Which was actually a reasonably difficult time. I'm not afraid to admit, just in terms of that. I don't know if you remember the name of that difficulty, Nick, but
Yeah, I don't, unfortunately.
no, but felt the combat came quite together as well. Really like the array of weapons, right? Looked stunning and ran quite well, especially on performance mode, right? For that too, but yeah, I was quite impressed.
Yeah, for me, Ratchet and Clank was by far my favorite game this year. Although I do have to admit it wasn't my favorite in the series. That said, I've also, and this is confession time here for everyone on the channel, I've only played two Ratchet and Clank games now. I played the 2016 remake of the original, and I played this one. I enjoyed the 2016 one more. I know it gets a lot of criticism from the fan base for being a little too family friendly and straying away from sort of the edginess that Ratchet and Clank had, but I was really impressed by it. And maybe that's because I went in with no expectations. I sort of looked at it as being more of a kid friendly game from the onset. And I also saw it also because it was a movie tie-in at the time. They were also doing the Ratchet and Clank movie at the same time. So I didn't have high hopes for it. I think I got it for like $15. So that might have contributed to why I was so impressed by it. And so going into Rift Apart, obviously I had those expectations. But that said, it was still an incredible game. It played really well. I really enjoyed the mechanic of being able to zip through rifts and move around battlefields to engage enemies. The combat was as great as ever. And again, I feel like the narrative did fall a little flat. This idea of separating Ratchet and Clank and pairing them up with new partners kind of resulted in, like you said, a little more of a superficial story because the time is so divided between the two characters, and so there's not as much room for development of one core relationship with this focus now on these two budding partnerships.
Yeah. And I
So,
think, just to
oh,
jump in here, so I think a good example of that, Nick, is just so in terms of Ratchet is coming to terms, especially with the beginning of the Dimension Ender, of reuniting with the Lombax as himself, right, and being able to access that, and expressing reluctance towards doing that, of it just not being it being different from his own expectations, and there really isn't a clear kind of the whys. Eventually, he gets to a place where he's like, oh, now I'm interested in doing this. Aside from kind of encouragement and validation, which I appreciate and support, but I think that just there could have been more kind of nuance developed, right, and introduced to getting him to that place than kind of what was seen personally, right? That's just
mhm.
my own thoughts on that.
No, I largely agree. And I think it's, again, because they needed to focus so much of the story between two different arcs. And so by splitting it up like that, you don't want people to be stuck playing like an 80-hour game because, generally, from what I understand, the Ratchet and Clank games are short but exciting
Hmm.
adventures. And so it would be totally coming out of left field to make it an 80-hour game a la Mass Effect or something like that.
Oh,
So
totally. But like,
I
yeah, achieve the exciting right adventure component quite well. And thanks for reminding me about that tactical like opening up in terms of actually rifts, right, moving around the battlefield. So, and that occurs quite seamlessly and displayed really what the PS5 had to offer quite well. It was a great, almost one of the flagship games. I know it wasn't immediate, but shortly thereafter, right, the launch that really displayed that well.
yeah, I also have Ratchet and Clank to thank for a huge portion of this channel's growth because I posted a 13-second clip from it that got over 150,000 views. So that was really exciting for me. I've never had something like that happen before, but that was fun.
Oh, that's sweet. What clip was that about?
It was Clank swearing
Oh, of course, of
because
course.
after I heard that, I had to pause for like 10 minutes and catch my breath because it just caught me so off guard.
When did that happen? I forgot that happened in the game. Wow, like I can't believe I glossed over that. It's been some time since I played it, but
It's right near the climax when they're in the vault near the end, and there's this I can't remember what it's called. This big skeletal monster comes up out of the ground, and Clank's just holy
oh
shit.
yes, oh yes,
So yeah, that was a big standout moment for me. Speaking of games that are centered around partnerships, It Takes Two at the Game Awards won Game of the Year, and I was pleasantly surprised by that. As much as my pick would have been Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, It Takes Two was another quality showing from Hazelight, which made me so happy because I really miss the days of couch co-op.
Oh, me too. And you spoke about the accessibility, Nick, and certainly, me and my partner have played it together, right? And certainly she isn't as interested as games, right? Hasn't played things before It Takes Two, but actually quite likes it herself, which is quite a nice surprise as well. But it's amazing to me of how the different genres really come together too. And just for full disclosure, I'm only kind of, very early on in the game. I'm just beginning part of Chapter 3, I believe, right? When we're kind of in the space kind of component in Rose's room, but have quite enjoyed the variety of gameplay from a platformer to like honestly just a co-op shooter to like at one point almost like one of that the classic kind of side-scrolling fighters, right? At least at this section at the end of chapter 2 there. But yeah, have you beat it, Nick?
I haven't yet. I've been waiting to finish it with Kristen as well. So I kind of find it funny that we've both played through it with our partners and have been enjoying it with them because it's all about a marriage that's on the brink of failure and learning to work together again. And it's just been such an enjoyable time. And like you said, it does a great job of mixing so many genres of gameplay, whether it's action adventure, a third-person shooter, fighters, platforming. The platforming sections, I will admit, were a little frustrating because Kristen really struggles with jumping in games. Anytime she has to jump and land on something, so those were a bit of a slog to get through, but we made it.
Oh yeah, right. And well, I think it does accessibility well in that sense, right? Is that the unlimited lives base and fairly forgiving checkpoints and whatnot. I will say certainly there's just discrepancies and different people being at different places for skill. Yeah.
Well, and the other big accessibility thing was making it free to the second player too.
Yes.
To make sure that you can play with someone you want to play with. You don't have to go through the whole hassle of random co-op matchmaking and play with a total stranger. And that, of course, Hazelight did that with A Way Out as well, and I absolutely love that. I think that is such a great thing for those games because it encourages gaming to be a social activity. Like,
totally. Yeah.
A lot of times when I'm playing games online with strangers, I will just mute my mic because I don't want to talk to people online. There's so much toxicity and hate that gets thrown around for just the most random asinine things. And I would rather, if I'm going to play a game, play it with someone who I know and who I know I'll enjoy it with. And so being able to just play that for free with someone I know, absolutely brilliant.
Oh, truly, right.
Now, I've got a few more games on my list here, but I feel like maybe they aren't things that we would really play. Did you play Back 4 Blood?
No, yeah, right, and so, like, I had seen that, right, I had seen cursorily some reviews, never before into the Back 4 Blood or Left 4 Dead kind of series at all myself, right, and seemed like an okay showing, but, it's that multiplayer piece that gated it for me, is that I really don't have, like a good community of folks interested in that genre of games to play consistently, right, and so that's just not something that is really high on my radar because of that.
For me, I was never into Left 4 Dead because it came out, the first game came out in 2008, and between 2006 and around 2015, I would say, we just got so many zombie things in pop culture that I really got sick of it. We had Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, The Walking Dead, Call of Duty Zombies, Dead Island, The Last of Us, and it got so overwhelming and so cliche that I just could not stand any more zombies.
Yeah, that's understandable, right? And especially, I don't know if this has been like a quite kind of an outstanding showing, right? Again, just in terms of choosing and prioritizing games to buy, especially when finances have just been harder for all really all folks, right? Just especially with the pandemic as well.
Well, I think that might be another big part too of why there's that perception that 2021 wasn't a great year in gaming, is because with so much difficulty as far as making an income for a lot of people, not everyone has the budget to be able to play all of these games, and so you really have to pick and choose which games you're playing and which you're not. And so to go along with that, another one I was interested in but couldn't pick up was Resident Evil Village. We also had Metroid Dread, which got great reviews for the Nintendo Switch. Although I've never been into the Metroidvania type games. Those have never really been my cup of tea.
Nor mine. I actually picked up Metroid Dread, and never before I've played a single Metroid game myself, but because of those great reviews, I've yet to play it, right? It's one of the next ones on my radar, but, in terms of some of the Metroidvanias, like, Hollow Knight especially, right, as I begin to delve more into that world, right, I'm, interested to see kind of where it all started from the Metroid, and how they're able to do that kind of backtracking, right, and the movement-based piece that they're really quite known for, so, yeah, looking forward to that eventually.
Next on my list, we have Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. Did you play any of that?
No, I did not.
See, you laugh, but it actually wasn't a horrible game. It was a competent Smash clone. It did have some troubles here and there. There weren't a lot of great combo animations, so the combat wasn't as fluid as something like Super Smash Bros. But it was a nice alternative to have to be able to play on another console for a platform fighter. I wish they had done a few more things with it, like adding voice lines, stuff like that. But it was an enjoyable experience for the time that I was playing it, and it was actually one of the bigger games on Twitch this year as far as viewership goes.
That's interesting, right? Well, and good for you, so long as it's enjoyable, right? Like, just a style of game didn't appeal to me in terms of at least the aesthetic piece, right? And my preference would probably be like Smash Bros. Itself and going to the original as opposed to going off any kind of even clone, as you say, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And I think that limited just my interest in terms of this case here.
And obviously Smash Bros. Has had years to refine its formula and so many iterations now that it really has become such a very well-refined series. So we had a couple other big games came out this year relatively late. We had Call of Duty Vanguard and Battlefield 2042. You've played a few Call of Duty games before, right? But not super into them anymore, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, that was back, so, Black Ops 1, right? Just to date myself in terms of really the last Call of Duty game I had played, right? And have since that time really shifted more towards the kind of first and third person, again, narrative action adventure games as in platformers. And so, yeah, I really can't speak well in terms of any of the shooters that you mentioned there.
Yeah, I will say though, back in the day, getting together and playing Call of Duty at your house with all of our friends, some of the best memories I have of playing that game, especially Black Ops 1.
Oh yes, yeah, that's seared into my mind as well. So some very positive experiences there.
Yeah, of course, a lot of people sort of hesitated to play Vanguard this year. I'm not sure if that's because of all the rumors circulating around it that the COVID pandemic really hurt the development cycle and that it wasn't going to be a quality game. Or if people have been straying away from Activision Blizzard games because of the ongoing controversy there. That was one of the bigger stories to come out of gaming this year, was all of the allegations of sexual harassment within Activision Blizzard, as well as several other game development studios and publishers.
And especially whenever we say allegations, we know, especially from a survivor perspective as well, we know those are true, right? As well, just in terms of the culture and how much suppression happens, right? And the fear and stigma, right? And and really, unfortunately, the lack of structural support that happens for folks in that setting too. So I just wanted to outline that too, and that obviously that's quite important to be proactive, and take a stance about in terms of actually dismantling, a lot of the really power structures as a resulted in folks, oppressing and suppressing people, right, in those scenarios, right? So that's
Of
yeah,
course,
that's
and
something I wanted to mention there.
it's
Yes.
been a lot of big name publishers too. We've seen not just Activision Blizzard, but also Ubisoft that have been fostering this culture of really toxic masculinity in the workplace. And I feel like a large part of that comes from the fact that gaming historically has been stereotypically a male-oriented hobby, and so it fosters this culture of toxic masculinity within it. To a point, like even online female streamers are constantly harassed for absolutely no reason, and it's really something that I feel has been a long time coming for the gaming industry, and it's a little shocking to me that more developers aren't being called out.
Oh, very true, and I think that it just goes to show the underreported piece to this is I'm sure that that's happening, right? And really, a lot, if not the majority of places, right? Just in terms of looking at kind of workplace harassment and how much of this is just internalized, right, and just not talked about because of the reasons we mentioned before, right? And so, yeah, it's been a long time coming, right? And it's something that we can't move fast enough on, honestly, when it comes to changing the culture here.
Of course, and one of the big issues, of course, is going to be the hierarchical structure of these publishers and their corporations, where uh, a lot of the staff don't have somewhere to actually go to report these kinds of issues without risking losing their job. So it is nice to see that things are starting to happen. I wish it would happen a little sooner. I know Call of Duty Warzone, I stopped playing it around March this year, largely due to the decline in quality of the game and the impact of hackers on the game. But recently, Raven Software's quality assurance team, who works on Warzone, went on strike because of all of this, and so it's starting to have a real world impact on the sales of these games, and hopefully that encourages some more action from these corporations,
Yeah,
because
it's
it's nice to see that they're having an impact on sales now.
It is, but I will say it's quite tragic, right, that it really requires like the actual bottom line, just from a capitalist perspective, for really kind of change to happen, as opposed to
Yeah.
from the moral and ethical standpoint that
Yeah.
it needs to happen from. Was just the point I was going to make
Yeah,
there.
yeah, of course. It is an unfortunate reality, but it seems that money is the only language a lot of developers speak these days, especially when you see games getting rushed out for profits without being complete, things like that. You know that it's largely about a business and not about an art or about treating people as human. The next big game on the list, Battlefield 2042. Not a lot to say about this one. I played the beta, and it's one of those games you can tell was hit hard by COVID in its development cycle, because the build that they released for the beta and I think what they actually launched with were both just in absolute shambles. There were visual bugs everywhere, the gunplay was awful, the user interface was awful. They changed a lot of the core mechanics of the game, like with the specialist roles, so they really missed the mark, I feel, on Battlefield 2042. So I haven't actually gone out to buy it yet. I'm definitely going to hold off for a few months at least before I consider getting that, because I need to see some real work done to fix that.
Yeah. From what I've seen, a fair amount of bugs too. Right? Again, not as much up my alley in terms of types of games, right? So it's something that I haven't really paid much attention to myself.
Mm-hmm. And then the last game, one that I've been playing a lot recently, Far Cry 6. A pleasant surprise. I feel I've been playing it a lot more than I expected to, and enjoying the feel of the gunplay in it. If I do have a couple issues, it's first of all the enemy AI is kind of brain dead sometimes, in that they'll start running somewhere and then for no reason just stop, and then you're lining up a shot and then they'll start moving again, or you'll be shooting down their friends and they won't move at all, things like that. That's a bit broken.
Even compared to Deathloop's AI, really?
Um, to be honest, I can't recall at this exact moment how bad Deathloop's AI was, so
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I can't really comment on it, but it did stand out to me as pretty jarringly bad for Far Cry 6. And then the other big issue I had with it is the same issue I've had with a lot of recent Ubisoft titles, in that they try to really stretch the game a lot further than it should be stretched. Whether that's in terms of having a massive open world that's just overstuffed with collectibles that don't do anything to enhance the gameplay, or by breaking up the main story into several different sub-stories that you have to play through that really just do not immerse you, because it's so hard to care about any of the characters because there are just so many of them.
Heard solid voice acting though, especially for the main villain.
Well, Giancarlo Esposito is
Yeah.
such a fantastic actor and so well renowned outside of gaming, of course. On TV, best known as Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. Of course, he's in The Mandalorian as
Yes,
Moff
I was just
Gideon.
going to say that. Yeah.
So he's got quite the resume behind him. And Far Cry villains are always so fantastic. Another Breaking Bad universe character in form of Nacho on Better Call Saul, played by Michael Mando, who is Voss in Far Cry 3. So,
Did not know that.
yeah. They've always got great villains. That's, if there's one thing Far Cry usually gets right, it's the villains.
Yeah, I haven't entered the series until from Far Cry 3 with Fast, right? Just in terms of there's that. So 4 or 5 I've skipped. I might re-enter in 6 because of what's been said, but a little bit lower down on my list, especially as we approach 2022 with all the games upcoming here, Elden Ring, Forbidden West, Ragnarok as well.
Yeah. Far Cry 5, I will say, was incredibly underrated. A lot of people hated on it because of the lack of a voice for the protagonist, as well as the ending a lot of people were upset with. I loved the ending. I loved that it wasn't a happy ending. Like, sometimes you lose, folks. It's kind of an unfortunate reality of life, but it was nice to see that it wasn't just a happy-go-lucky, everyone goes off on their own ways ending. There were multiple endings, and spoiler alert, I'm sorry if you guys haven't played the games. It's been a few years. Get over it. One ending is the entire map gets nuked. The other ending is your character goes insane and murders all of your companions. But,
Were those the only two endings there?
There's a third.
Bleak,
There's a
yeah.
third secret ending, but I won't spoil that one because it's a secret. So you have to actually find it to actually experience it.
I see. But those are the two default endings.
Yeah. I loved how dark they were. I was totally happy with it.
As someone who enjoyed a Rogue One and the ending to that, right? I do enjoy real stakes as well, so I don't mind especially for a little bit more of a morbid sense of humor, let's say.
All right, so that is our look back at 2021 gaming. Adam, your overall thoughts about 2021?
Oh, before we cap it off here, I can't believe you're just gonna leave out Kenna Bridge of Spirits, the indie game of the year for the just from the Game Awards.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to rewind and pretend I didn't just say that. So, to cap it off, we will talk about Kena Bridge of Spirits.
Oh
Please,
my gosh, yeah,
go
like,
ahead.
good. I'm glad we're rewinding this here. But so Ember Lab, formerly an animation studio, but just what a wonderful, beautiful showing, right? You can clearly show the textures and the animation on the cute little creatures, right, that follow you around from this immersive world. Like,
I feel really bad about forgetting this at first now, because Ember Labs actually created an animation for Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. I think it was like a year or a couple of years ago, and it was it's my favorite game of all time. I loved the animation for it. It was great, really well done. So I can't believe I forgot about them here. I'm just gonna go do a walk of shame. Be right back.
No, but and you can definitely see the Zelda-like influences in terms of a lot of the puzzle solving, right? Surprisingly quite a fun combat, right? And as someone who in quite a difficult combat series as well, right? And so with the multiple difficulties and as someone who completed the game in platinum termed it, especially with the Master Guide, Spirit Guide kind of playthrough, really pushing you to the limits. It's almost like Ken of Souls is another joke for it when it kind of gets to the higher difficulties. Does boss designs quite well, right, and quite unique, especially with a lot of the sound design and especially the cinematics around the boss fights. If you remember the Woodsmith in particular, right, and that particular boss battle is just really a standout experience for me. But certainly, right, quite impressed overall, and really utilize that kind of ability system well, with kind of the rots gaining courage as you consecutively hit the enemies together to be able to unlock some of these higher tier attacks that you're able to execute there. But a challenge, a rewarding challenge, and one that was a beautiful experience overall, even when one was faced with repeated deaths.
Yeah, but another game, I unfortunately didn't have it within my budget or the time available to play, so that's one I'm definitely going to have to check out, especially because of all the Zelda-inspired influences present within the game. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for our look at 2021 in gaming. So, Adam, your overall thoughts?
Overall thoughts that the pandemic continues to wreak havoc in all sectors, right, of life, but still some quite impressive, and in some ways, and especially returning to Returnal and seeing the prizes of that, right, I think underappreciated gems too that we'll look back here in terms of really that had advanced us forward, right. Deathloop, despite its flaws, really quite enjoyable, right, but for someone like myself with the action adventure narrative, right, it was quite a blast, honestly, to be a part of it. I think we'll build on the strong start, right, in terms of what 2022 has to offer for us going forward here.
Yeah, of course, 2021 for me created a huge backlog of stuff that I'm now going to need to go back and play once I have the budget to do so. But for me, of course, standout was Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. First PS5 exclusive, first game I feel like that really took advantage of the ray tracing, the adaptive triggers, and just pulled out all the stops for the PS5, and really just an enjoyable experience all around. Is there anything in particular in 2022 that you're looking forward to?
Oh, so Horizon Forbidden West, hands down for me, right? Already on pre-order, looking forward to that. We'll need to go, really a game that, with time, so narratively among the best I've played, but though needed a little bit more refining in terms of some of the, the journess, and especially going in and out of water and like minor stuff like that, right? That looks very much improved, right? Looking at kind of especially the new trailers for that, so very much looking forward to the continuation of Aloy's story, as well as a refined combat system, including the more kind of physical-based melee combat, right? That seems to be way more fleshed out than it was, certainly in the original.
Yeah, for me, it's got to be Hogwarts Legacy.
Yeah.
We haven't seen much about the game, but I'm really excited to see what they do with it from what I have seen and what I've heard leaked about it. I used to be a huge Harry Potter fan. I kind of hopped off the bandwagon for a while because my sister got really into it and I got sick of hearing about Harry Potter all the time. But I really, really would love to see a really well done Harry Potter game.
Yeah, I agree, right. As certainly a fan of the series as well, but have, like yourself, stepped away from it. I look forward to seeing what is done. I mean, I'm a little bit cautious in terms of seeing how it fares before kind of jumping into that right off the bat, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us today. Adam, I want to give a huge thank you to you for joining us here today on the L2Games Podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure again. Thanks for the invite, Nick. It's been a blast.
Of course. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch this episode. Hopefully we'll be back with more before you know it, but it's tough to say right now. If you haven't already and you enjoy the content here on the channel, consider leaving a like and clicking that subscribe button. And for any of you cinephiles out there, be sure to check out the Snubs and Dubs podcast, a look back on a year in film and the race for the Best Picture Award. Once again, I am your host, Nick, and that is going to do it for us here today on the L2 Games Podcast. We'll catch you guys in the next one.